Don't get interest.
Okay.
Don't get interest.
Okay.
I won't.
Okay.
So this is Sfat Emet meeting 1. We're
Okay.
doing parhsat Vayechi, the last parsha in Bereshit. First, I want to talk a little bit about who the Rebbe of Gur was. This is easy because I'll just take it off Wikipedia right here. About the Shoshelet, the dynasty of Gur. By the way, in Israel, the Gerer Hasidim, I think, has the second largest Hasidic group in Israel. The first largest, as far as I know, is Vishnitz.
That's where Daddy comes from.
And Vishnitz, their center is in Bnei Brak. Gur, their center is here in Yerushalayim. You know, when you walk into the city near the Tachana Merkazit, they have yeshiva right there. The beginning of Agrippa Street going up to the Shuk. That's the Gerer Hasidim. So I want to show you this right now. We'll do share screen. And this is just from Wikipedia. But a little bit about, okay, this book is written by Yehudah Aryei Leib Alter. The Alter family is still the family of the Rebbes of Gur. And he was born in 1847, died in 1905. His sefer, the Sfat Emet, Sfat Emet, is based on the pasuk Sfat Emet Tikon La'ad, is probably one of the important Hasidic works. Like all Hasidic works, by the way, you can always argue whether it's a commentary on the Parsha or whether the Parsha is the excuse for the commentary. You can always make that argument with a Hasidic text. But that's okay, because unless you're actually looking for a run-along commentary like a Rashi or a Ramban or a Rashbam or a Chaim, you know, Hasidic discussions or discourses really take a life of their own. Okay, so it's called Gur, the Gerer Hasidim, because they started in a Polish town by the name of Gora Kalvaria. And you know, in Hebrew and Yiddish, very often the names get a little bit changed. Krakow becomes Kroke, so Gora Kalvaria becomes Gur. And today it's also called Gora Kalvaria. Now, another thing about Aryei Leib Alter is his actual name was Yehudah Leib Alter. But when he got married, his father-in-law, how did it go? Excuse me. His name was Aryei Leib Alter, and he married a woman whose father was also Aryei Leib. And you know, there's this minhag from Sefer Hasidim that it's not good to have a father-in-law that has the same name as you, because then you're calling him by his name and in kavod, whatever. So he added the name Yehudah, his name too, Yehudah Aryei Leib. Okay, I think they even mentioned this here. He was his parents died when he was young. Rabbi Avram Mordechai Alter, his father, died when he was 8 years old, and his mother died also when he was very young. So he was brought up by his grandfather, Chidushei Harim, who is the founder of Gerer Hasidim. So his grandfather is Yitzchak Meir. Now, there's a lot to say about Yitzchak Meir. Yitzchak Meir is the founder of Gur. So in a sense, even though his father is the founder, he writes a parush on the Talmud called Chidushei Harim. He, by the way, is a colleague of Menachem Mendel of Kotsk. And Yehudah Aryei Leib becomes a Talmud of Menachem Mendel of Kotsk, and also a Talmud of the colleague and Talmud Menachem Mendel of Kotsk, Simcha Bunim of Feshischa, which are both Hasidic courts, which I would say are sort of elitist. They're not so much into the popular, let's get the people. It's more, let's get people who we feel are worthy of this understanding. So Kotsk is like that, and Feshischa is like that, and at least Yehudah Aryei Leib was like that too. Whether his son continued in that way or not is another question. Just one other thing, Menachem Mendel Kotsk is a Talmud of the Chose of Lublin, the seer of Lublin, so that sort of puts it into which is what we call Polish Hasidim. Okay, I wanted to say that, by the way, family name of his grandfather, Yitzchak Meir, was actually not Alter, it was Rotenberg. And they were descendants of the Maharam of Rotenberg. So why did they change their name from Rotenberg to Alter? There was an uprising in Poland during the lifetime of Yitzhak. His second name was it Yitzhak Meir? And during this uprising in Poland, both the Gerer Rebbe and the Rebbe of Kotsk sided with the Polish peasants. Because of that, government was after them. Because the government was after them, in those days, people didn't actually have family names was like a new thing. So if your name was Rotenberg and you switched it to somebody else, the chances of them finding you would be very difficult because there weren't a lot of family names. It was like a new concept. So he just switched his family name from Rotenberg to Alter, and that way the police really couldn't find him anymore because Aryei among Jews is really popular type of name. So that's basically why they
when were last names, when did they become popular, last names?
Last names become popular in the last 200 years. I'll give you an example. The Vilna Gaon is not known by having a last name, even though some people say his last name was Kramer, but it's not certain. But he was just Elijah, the son of Shlomo Zalman. That's the way people were called. They were called by their fathers. By the beginning of I would say already by the end of the 18th century, beginning of the 19th century, that's when family names become obligatory. Under the Russian government, under the Prussian government, they start forcing family names on people. So people lived under Prussia, which today is Germany and a few other places. They usually got these German family names, Rosenberg and Blum-Rosen and Greenberg and things like that. And the ones who lived in Poland had the other names, sometimes after cities, Warszawski, Krakowski, also could be after the father, Davidson and Melechson and whatever, Avramson, things like that. So they're different, but you had to have some type of family name. So in Prussia, it was given to you. In Poland, which later became Russia, it was sort of like agreed upon, and that's where the family names start. So I just want to say a little bit about him before we look at the Sefer. The Sefer also, I don't know if it's in English. I'm going to show you here in the share screen in Hebrew. You have the text here from WikiText. Is it WikiText? It's one of them. Now, what he does is basically, this whole Sefer are Dvar Torahs that he gave to his Hasidim on Shabbos, and then on Motzei Shabbat, he writes it down by himself. So he says, Parhsat Vayechi, Afresh Lamed Aleph, that's from 1871. This is what he said, the Parsha Vayechi in 1871. And then if you keep going, after this one, which is a rather lengthy one, then you'll have another one after that. And this is what he said in 1872. Sometimes it overlaps. Like, he gives something 2 or 3 years later. Sometimes you figure, okay, they forgot what I said 4 years later. It's not a problem. And sometimes it's totally different. I'm going to take the first one, and that'll probably take up all our time. At least you'll start to understand his style. His style. Okay, anybody have a problem with the Ivrit?
A little bit.
Yeah, like if you find it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even if I explain it, it's difficult with Ivrit, because I just don't know if there is an English translation of the Sfat Emet. I'm just not sure if there is.
Well, if you explain it,
I will read it and we'll see what
translate.
happens. Yeah, of course. Okay, it says, Baruch Hashem, Nichta Bekitzur. I wrote this in a summary. Adoni Aviz Keni. Do you know what that means? Adoni Aviz Keni. My master, my father, the old one, but we would call today my grandfather. So Adoni Aviz Keni means my grandfather. Today we say Saba. In those days they didn't say Saba. It was Adoni Aviz Keni. Right? My old man or my grandfather. Morain of Rabbeinu, in other words, and his grandfather, of course, is the first Rebbe of Gur, Yitzchak Meir. So he gave a Torah on Vayechi. Vayechi Yakov be'eretz Mitzrayim. Why does it say that Yakov lived in the land of Egypt for such and such years. That's the way the parsha starts. Why doesn't it just say that he dwelled in Egypt for such and such lived? What does it mean he lived? Okay, Levin. It also has, when you think of it in the Yiddish, it has a certain meaning behind it too. And remember, these people were thinking in Yiddish even when they were reading Hebrew. So Vayechi Yakov be'eretz Mitzrayim, ki al shva'asrei shana. It says he lived in Egypt for shva'asrei shana. Ki al yedei bechinat emet. Because when a person is able to reach truth, meaning the midah of truth, which is called the attribute of truth, or the divine attribute of truth, yocholim lichyot gam be'eretz Mitzrayim, then they can feel vitality even in the land of Egypt. When he says vitality, he means divine vitality. What does this mean? As you know, in the three avot, our patriarchs, in Kabbalistic lingo, they represent three attributes. Avraham is called chesed, and Yitzchak is called yira, fear, reverence, and Yakov is called emet. Like it says in Micha, Titen emet liYakov, chesed lavraham, shenishpata lavotenu mimein kedem. Give truth to Jacob and give kindness to Abraham, like you have promised our forefathers from days back. So Abraham is called kindness, and Yakov is called truth. Now, this is interesting because you would think that Yakov would be the last one of what you want to call truth. I mean, didn't he deceive his father? And didn't he buy the Bechorah from Esav?
But he learned. But he learned. He turned around. He turned it around.
Turned around which way?
He learned from his mistakes, and then he did teshuva, I guess, and learned from his lying. That I actually spoke to someone about this recently. I'm not sure, but
you sound just like me.
you know, right? I know we're a little related.
Wait, I believe you. You don't have to prove it.
She has to remember it, so she has to go to
Okay.
We're sisters for a reason.
I have to go through it now, and you put me on the spot.
Not on purpose.
She put herself on the spot.
Now I have to have an answer. Well, okay, wait, okay. No, don't wait for me. Keep going.
I was going to say, wake me up.
I think, look, Shivim Padim LaTorah, there are many ways to explain things. I think it's sort of the opposite. I think Yaakov is a man of truth, but when you are constantly confronting liars, slanderers, and criminals, you have to learn to deal with it. And that's what he does. He confronts Esav, who wants to kill him. He has to confront Lavan, who gives him the wrong wife and keeps changing his salary all the time and says he can go, but he can't go. And then when he wants to go, it's actually my children and it's my cattle. Lavan says, everything you have is for me. And then he, and then he has, so life is not easy for Yaakov. And so even for a man of truth, when life is not easy, you have to learn how to deal with the Romans when you live among them. So I think in that sense, Yaakov is a man of truth, but he's not given the privilege and the luxury to live in the land of truth. And that's what I think. Yes. So did you want to say something based on, Connie, on? Yeah, but that's just my thinking about Yaakov. If you remember what Rashi says based on Unclos, Ba'achicha b'mirma, your brother has come in mirma, which literally means cheating, and taken your birthright. So Unclos and Rashi translate mirma b'chokhmata, with wisdom. So
this is very convenient for the Rabbanim in Chutz La'aretz to say that if you are on such a madrega, you can even find Emet in Chutz La'aretz because you're in such a high. So it's very convenient for them to have this perush because they're not living in Israel; they live in Chutz La'aretz, and they can feel like they're on a ramah that they can get kedusha because they live in.
Here, when he said you can find life through Emet.
Life.
He didn't say you can find truth. There is no truth in this world, according to the Talmud. I met
you can find life, but it's convenient for him.
You can find
also.
life.
Yeah.
Anyhow, but let's get back to this. So Avram represents Chesed. Yitzchak represents
You're
chesed and love, because love and giving go together. When you love, you give. And in fact, sometimes when you give, you start to love. Sometimes that's a problem. You help somebody so much, you start loving them, but they're not the right person to be in love with.
Sometimes you help them so much you hate them.
I guess if you hated them from the beginning, no? If you didn't
No.
like them from the
Oh, no, you
beginning.
might give and give and give and give and never not get it in reciprocated at all. And then you start
Right.
hating,
Well, let's say you have a handicapped person that you keep giving to, you say it's a misken, you have to help.
Okay.
It turns into a sort of a love, because the giving can bring love.
And kids, your kids.
Oh,
Kids for
that's, yeah,
sure.
for sure, kids.
Yeah,
Yeah.
even kids who are not responsive.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
for sure. It's
Because there's
unconditional.
always an explanation. They're there, you have an obligation, so they're not
Yes,
responsive.
it's unconditional. Yeah,
Yeah, so
that's true.
yeah, so giving can create love, which cannot be a problematic. That's why the Chazal say, "Ahava mekalkelet et hashura." There's something about love which breaks the boundaries. That's why they're dangerous sometimes. It's over love can be without limits, and then it can become dangerous. So Avram is called Ahava. He loves everyone. These three people come to his tent, which according to the Midrash were idol worshippers who were worshiping to the dirt on their feet. If there are levels of idol worship, this is like the lowest. Actually, instead of worshiping the sun and the stars or whatever, they're worshiping the dirt on their feet. So, it's like, but it's okay. He's like, everybody is okay. That's Abraham. He's able to look around. Everybody's beautiful. Everybody's wonderful. So like a Shlomo Karbach.
I was gonna say, yeah, the
Yeah.
happy minion.
It's something like that. So Abraham is real ahava, real chesed. He's a doer. Chesed also means to be active as different than passive, because love means to do. Kindness is to do. It's to be active. If you sit back and you don't do, you can't be kind. You can think about being kind. You weren't kind because you didn't do anything, right? So it's like I always say to people, I love work. I can just sit down and watch people doing it all day. So something like that is about, chesed. Yeah, chesed is wonderful. Oh, I see all these people doing chesed. What about you? I gave it $10. But I support the so yeah, so so Avram represent also, because you have these midot, which is not only in the Navi, this is the way the Kabbalah understands it, that this is what Avram is. When you look in his life, Avraham is the most active of all the Avot. He's the doer, because he's the man of kindness. He's digging wells, he's fighting the four kings, he's saving Lot. It's like he's doing lots of stuff because he's a very active person. So ahava and kindness have to do with active people. If you really want to do things, of course, you can be active for negative ways too. But if you want to be active for positive, you have to be a doer. To quote Wayne Gretzky, who played for the Montreal Canadiens and was a very good scorer in hockey, when they asked him the question, what was your worst shot you ever took on the ice? He said, my worst shot was the one I never took.
Oh.
Yeah. So when you do, okay, you'll make mistakes. But if you made a mistake even twice out of 10, but 8 times you did the right thing. So you have to be active in order to do things. I say that to myself too, because sometimes, we cerebral intellectuals, we have to push ourselves to be active more.
I know what you mean.
I don't have that problem. Yeah.
Okay. Say there. So that's called Chesed Avraham. And this is in Kabbalistic literature, Avraham's Bechina, Avraham's attribute. He mimics the attribute of Chesed. Avraham Ohavi, Yeshayahu says. And as I said, Micha says, Chesed Avraham. And then Yitzchak is called parhsat, or yira, reverence. If you remember when Lavan and Yakov meet up, and Lavan says, why did you leave in the middle of the night? And Yakov says, well, I was afraid that you wouldn't let me go. You would take my wives away. So they make a pact, make a brit. And it says that Lavan swore in the name of the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, which was a pagan god. And it says that Yakov swore Befachad Yitzchak Aviv, in the name of the reverence of Isaac, his father, meaning the fear of Isaac, the God of Isaac. But the God of Isaac is called pachad, fear or reverence, which is the bechina, which is the attribute of Yitzchak. Fear is also something which creates inability to be active. When fear freezes you, you keep away, you're repelled because you don't want to go forward. So
That's
fear is
Yitzchak.
really
That's
passive.
Yitzchak.
That's exactly Yitzchak. Exactly Yitzchak. He does very little. He never leaves the land of Israel. By the way, he follows the law exactly. He has only one wife, never leaves the land of Israel. And
But that could be an attribute. He never left Israel.
yes,
He
it's
only
partly
had one
attribute of
life.
midat adin also.
He was
Pachad
more
and din go
passive, though.
together. The law,
But
he
it's more-
follows the law. The
yeah.
law, you're not supposed to leave the land. I don't leave the land.
And
Right.
he had one wife and he
He
didn't
had
take
one wife.
another.
You
And he had
this is
Ahava
what's
for his
expected.
wife. There was
One wife. That's
Ahava
it.
in his
Yeah.
first wife. Yeah.
Yes. Also, he's very passive. Even the
Yeah.
Be'erot, which are the wells that he dug, were the wells that Avraham had dug up, and the Plishtim had filled them up. They weren't new wells. He was just redigging the wells of his father. And he talks very little, and things happen to him. He has
Right.
his wife brought to him by Eved Avraham. His children
Right.
manipulate him. It's really his wife, Rivka, who manipulated him through Yakov. And he
Right.
just watches and he analyzes. Interesting. I call Yakov Yadai Midei Esav. This is very interesting. Like, what's going on here? But he realizes there's a problem, but he just lets it happen because he feels that, hey, this is probably what's supposed to be happening. I'm not belittling Yitzchak, by the way. Without going into it, I'm 100% convinced of what the Sfat Emet says on parhsat Toldot, that Yitzchak knew exactly who Esav was. And it was Rivka who didn't
Do you
know.
suspect that? Do you suspect that there was something wrong with him, though, like with
No,
Yitzchak?
not at all.
You know. All right.
Not at all. He was a man who, since the time of the Akedah, was living on a very high sphere of life. And he looked at life from a pedestal, from a point of view. Sort of like Moshe Rabbeinu. He was not exactly on the regular human level.
So why did he tremble when he realized it was Yakov?
Because the plan was to give the bracha to Esav. This is Sfat Emet. Oh, it is Sfat Emet. It's the wrong parsha, but if you want, I'll tell you this. We won't get very far, but I can tell you.
Okay.
Sfat Emet basically says that when it says that Rivka loved Yaakov and Esav loved, and Yitzchak loved Esav, you love the child who's the one you think needs you the most, because you have to give them the most attention. So he knew exactly who Esav was. He figured Yaakov, he's a tzaddik, he'll be okay. Esav. And Yitzchak believed that Yaakov would be the spiritual leader of the house of Abraham, and Esav would be the physical leader. And he would be the military man and the agricultural man. And that's why if you look at the blessing of Vayiten Lecha, it's all physical blessing. Yiten Lecha Elohim Tala Shamayim Mishmanei Haaretz, blessing of the land. V'rov dagan v'tirosh, a great crop. Yavducha amim v'yishtachavu lecha leumim, nations shall bow down to you, right? So it's basically a very physical, political blessing, which he intended to give to Esav. And if you remember, he does have a different blessing for Yakov. He says, Yiten lecha birkat Avraham. When Yakov goes to Laban's house, because Rivka says, I want you to go there and find a girl from my family to marry. So then Yakov gives him another blessing, a different blessing, despite the fact that just the day before he told Esav he had no other blessings. Because it meant that for Esav he had no other blessings. But for Yaakov, he didn't give him the blessing yet, because he didn't expect Yaakov to grab Esav's blessing. That was not part of the deal. So that's why he wondered, how could it possibly be that the same Yaakov, who is the call, who is the voice, also wants to be the hands, which is the physical? Why would he want to? But Rivka understood that Yaakov has to do both, because Esav can't even be the hands. So in that sense, Rivka was correct. But it's not that Yitzchak didn't understand who Esav was. He just expected Esav and Yaakov to get along, the same way he got along with Ishmael. But that didn't happen. Okay, let's get back to this. So all of this was to explain that Avram is called Chesed, Yitzchak is called Pachad or Yira or Din, and Yakov is called Emet. Yakov shares is the attribute of Emet, which he has truth within him, even though he is faced with the vicissitudes of life, where compromises have to be made in this world because we don't live in a world of truth. So even a man of truth in our world has to do certain compromises in order that life continue. Doesn't mean he has to lie though. Hine, lo hayalo rak lo hayalo lomar. It didn't have to say Vayechi Yakov. It could have said Vayechi Yakov beretz Mitzrayim. That Yakov was in the land of Egypt. Why does it say that he lived in the land of Egypt? Mashma de'ikar rabuta. It means that it's trying to tell you. Masha b'vchinat chaim, which means he felt life. What is chaim? Chaim means you are connected to the root and to the source from which vitality comes. Where did he feel that? He was able to feel that even in Egypt, even the Galut. Because normally you feel that in Eretz Yisrael when you have Nevuah, when you daven, but on the level of Yaakov, he was able to feel it even when he was in the land of Egypt. And therefore it says in the Zohar and parhsat Yidgash, also in the pasuk, but Tefi Ruach Yaakov, it says something similar. V'nireli, and it seems to me, Shehu Milashon Mayim Chaim. Here the term Chaim, Chaim is like we call a wellspring of water. When a person is happy, it arouses the source of life. Happiness arouses the source of life. I think that's actually psychologically sound statement. That when you are happy, you feel alive because life feels fulfilled. Maharal of Prague says when you're happy, you feel complete. And when you feel complete, you feel okay. Because when we don't feel completed, we need this, we need that. Yeah. So that's why, according to Abraham Maslow, you can only feel that way at peak experiences sometimes in life. When you feel that abundance of fulfillment. But in general, he says Yaakov could feel that because he was able to touch the source of vitality, and therefore he felt this idea of being alive, even though he was in Egypt. Of course, we could explain it differently, but it could be the same, because remember, he comes to Egypt. Yosef was 17 years old when he was taken by his brothers and sold to Egypt. So the first 17 years of Yosef's life, Yaakov's life was fine. The last 17 of his years, which is Gematria Vayechi, by the way, he lives in Egypt, right? Vayechi, last 18 years, excuse me. No.
Yeah, you're correct.
No. 30, no, it's, sorry. Vayechi is Vayechi is Vav, Yud, 20, 30, 28, 34. It's 17 twice.
Yep.
So there's I forget who explains this way, that Vayechi is 34 because it's the 17 years until Yosef was stolen and sold into slavery, and it's the last 17 years that Yakov is living in Mitzrayim with Yosef, and his family is complete. So he's happy when his family was complete before the story of Yosef being sold, and he's happy at the end of his life after the family gets back together and the brothers are working together again. So this is Vayechi Yaakov. I forget who says that. I think it was the Balaturin who mentions this. So, but he's saying that Yaakov, because he has Bechinat Emet, he's able to feel this vitality even in Egypt. And I'm adding to what he's saying that he had a lot of reason to feel the vitality because his sons got back together. They realized that they were all one. I mean, this Achdut, as we know in this war, when the Jewish people get together, they're unstoppable. It's when we start fighting with each other that we are weak. And so when Yaakov sees that his sons are all together, it's like, for him, this is nirvana, whatever you want to call it. This is a special situation. The Midrash says in Midrash Rabbah that Yaakov a drasha on the Shema Yisrael. Yakov says to his sons, are you with me? And his sons say, just like you only have one God in your heart, so we too have only one God in our heart. And they said to him, Shema Yisrael, listen, Israel, which was Yaakov's name. Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Your God is our God. Anyhow, so I would say that it was two things. Not only what he's saying, that Yaakov has this ability to feel vitality in places of darkness, but I think also life smiled at him in the last 17 years of his life when he saw that his sons were all going in his way. I mean, that's a real bracha. If all your children can go in the way you wanted them to, I mean, you can't really ask for much more than that. Here he's adding also that the inner soul of man, which is called the nefesh, which is called the ratzon in Kabbalah, the inner will, always can feel the inner vitality, which means this is something, this is going to be actually a motif in his thinking. What he calls the nekudah hapnimit, the inner point. The Sfat Emet in many, many places talks about the inner point. It's not just Yakov, who's because he's Emet, he can feel it all the time. But every Jew has this connection to that inner point, to the nefesh, where if they really want to, they can feel the spiritual worlds within themselves if they focus on it. Later on in Yiddish literature, it's called Das Pinta Yid, that little Jew inside you. But it's called that, he calls it Hanekuda, the little point. The little point. And he explains it in many ways. Here he's talking about it as the nefesh, the soul within you. In other words, you have your conscious mind, and then the point is the subconscious mind just above your consciousness. If you can touch that subconscious that's above your consciousness, that's the world that you can connect to. Remember, the Hasidic world in general was interested in spirituality, not out there, but in here. Sort of like the Eastern religions, if you want to make that type of a parallel. But Ruchnius is within you. So that's why Avraham, according to the Sfat Emet, is told by God, Lech Lecha. What's Lech Lecha? Go into yourself, and then you will discover the land that I am showing you. In other words, you can walk into the land, but if you want to understand the land, you have to immerse yourself within yourself in order to understand the meaning of that land. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, who actually came to the land of Israel. By the way, I have to admit, the Gerer Hasidim were not just spiritual about this, because the son of the Sfat Emet, Avram Mordechai of Gur, made Aliyah. He came to Israel the first time in 1921. He was invited by Chaim Weizmann, and he also met Rav Kook, 1921. And he came to Israel, and Weizmann said, let's send a letter to the Jews around the world. Well, tell them it's time to make Aliyah. We're trying to build things here. And he agreed. They sent the letter. Nobody came. So it's like 1921, things were still good in Poland. Why make Aliyah? So he went back, and he was able to, and he ran away from Poland during the war, somewhere around 1940, and was able to make it back to the land of Israel with his son. And they set up the Gerer Hasidim in Yerushalayim. At that time, he died in 1948 during the War of Independence, but from natural reasons. He died during the War of Independence, and he and his son are buried in Machne Yehudah. There's like a courtyard behind a house where the Rebbe of Gur and his son are buried there, and all the Gerer Hasidim in Israel, that's the place that they go to that site. So I can't say he didn't take the land of Israel seriously, even though he always talks about looking into yourself to discover the land. It's like the story of Nachman of Breslov. Natan Sternhartz, who was the main disciple of Rav Nachman and wrote down everything, including Likutei Moharan, Natan Sternhartz of Breslov. So there's a sefer that he put out called Eretz Yisrael, which is a collection of all the things that Rav Nachman said about Eretz Yisrael. So in the introduction to the book, there's an excerpt there where he said to Rav Nachman, when you say Eretz Yisrael, are you referring to the land of Israel down here, or are you referring to the spiritual sphera of the land of Israel up there in the heavens? So which one are you referring to? So Nachman said to him, I'm talking about those houses and those courtyards and the roads, the physical one. That's what I'm talking about. So, which I always thought that was cute. Let's go here, continue here a little bit. So, V'gam, even though Yakov was in the land of Egypt, Yada, Shekol HaMetzarim, he knew that all the boundaries, it's a play on words, Mitzrayim is both Egypt and also boundaries in Hebrew. Meitzar is a boundary. All the frontiers, all the boundaries. Hemrak Klipa v'Hester, all the limitations of the physical world are just divinity hiding its face. But those who are on the level of Yakov, they're able to see through these curtains and these veils and know that even in the lowest places, there is divine revelation. And that also reminds me of Rab Nachman, but I'll just keep going here. The inner essence of the world is the divine vitality, no matter how bleak things look. Therefore, it's always worth davening, because the distance between you and God is only the way you see reality. It's not that God's far away. It's that you're far away. Reb Nachman also says this. Says, even if you feel like really far away from God because your life is taking you in the wrong direction, he says, you're not. It's just a matter of a decision. And he says, and besides, if you were really far away from God, you wouldn't think you were far away from God. So the very fact you think you're far away from God, not so far away. That's Nachman of Breslov. But his idea here is this is a very well-known Hasidic idea. It's also Rav Shneir Zalman says the same thing. The difference between living in a physical world and a spiritual world is only our mind. We see physicality, but God is right here. So hapnimiut, the inner part of this world, is divine vitality. That's why Chazal say that Rishoim, evil people, even when they're alive, they're called dead. Because they're never connected to that inner life. They're not interested. Because the whole reason for a person to be in this world is in order to connect. Is not to connect to this world. The hipuch. It's in order for a person to connect the vitality, which is you can discover in the inner part even of this world, which comes from God. Because a person is supposed to find that holy, sanctified point, which is always covered by the nations. The whole idea of being in the Galut Mitzrayim, as it says to Avram, your children will be like strangers in a land. What was the point to go to Egypt? In order to bring out that holy, sanctified point, which had drowned in Egypt. And that's what Avram is told later. They will leave with a great bonus, the rechush, with great treasure. What's the great treasure? They'll discover who they are as a people. This is what Rashi says, that Yakov wanted to tell them the end of days, which means he wanted to explain to them that Galut, in exile, is just God hiding his countenance. But the inner life is all from God. And if God would reveal that to us, there wouldn't be Galut. So Yaakov wanted to tell that to them, V'nistam, but he wasn't allowed to tell it. That's why parhsat Vayechi, according to Rashi, has no break between the previous parsha and this parsha, to tell you that Yakov wasn't able to tell these things to his. He was blocked from telling these things to his children. Like it says in the Zohar, but the Zohar actually says that he did tell them, but he told them a secret way. He didn't tell them directly. A perush. Okay. Until now, are you following, or did I lose you?
Yeah, I'm fine. We're fine.
Didn't lose you yet? Okay, let's keep
No,
going. Maybe I'll use
good.
you.
No, not yet.
So far, so good. Okay. Now he says like this. Until now, he said, you have this concept. In Mitzrayim, we're looking for their inner point. Every person is looking for their inner point. Now, what is the inner point? The inner point for a person is looking for your connection to God personally. The inner point in Mitzrayim is looking what the Aryei would call for the fallen sparks, which means for the sanctity which exists everywhere in the world. But it's fragmented sanctity, and fragmented sanctity goes in the wrong way. Every distorted ideal has a real ideal behind it. Even woke liberal ideas started from liberal ideas, which were not woke, but they were taken to an extreme, they became fragmented. So even, the idea of mercy and compassion is a great idea, and it's very important in human life. But when you have compassion for your enemy, you are fragmenting an important idea and distorting it. Kol hachomel al harishayim basof mitachzer al tzadikim. Right? Chazal say anybody who has compassion for the evil, in the end they will be cruel to the righteous. Just like Shaul had compassion to the king of Amalek, Agag, wanted to keep him alive, but he killed all the Kohanim of Nov because they betrayed him. And they were all righteous, the Kohanim of Nov. All they did was save David. But Shaul had such a hatred for David, he killed all the Kohanim of Nov. So,
But is it true, Rafi, that every person is looking for the inner spark or connection to Hashem?
I'm going to answer it in the name of the Sfat Emet.
Okay.
So, he would say yes, even if they don't realize.
Look, there are people that Jews, non-Jews, they use LSD to try to get a connection to God or to understand themselves better,
Yeah.
or some
yeah.
spiritual high. But people like me who have no desire to get to a place like that, and I feel connected to God, but I'm not looking for more. I'm not looking for an
Okay, I don't
something
think that
Gavaldic.
I don't think he's necessarily referring to an ecstatic experience of a direct revelation. I don't think it's true. The Hasidic movement is very sympathetic towards people who want to receive some type of Ruach HaKodesh and Devekut and in davening and in learning. They're very sympathetic to these ideas, but I don't think that's not necessarily what he's saying. He believes that it's the way you look at life. And he's going to explain that right now. He says the way you do this is through Amunah.
But it's all about connection to Hashem, that you're just trying to find the connection to Hashem.
Yes.
I actually think it's almost the opposite, where I think Hashem gives everyone a little pintle of something. Like, well, he's an artist, like Hashem gave her that to
Yes.
connect. You know what I mean? It's like finding
Connie is
what
a
Hashem,
fashion designer.
right.
Okay. So you can
and
find your
I
Ruchniyut.
feel like Hashem, that Hashem gave me.
Yeah.
Hashem gave me, and that's how I find the connection to Hashem, because of what Hashem gave
too.
me.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. So you have this talent, and through your talent, you're discovering Hashem. That makes sense to me.
But in Chassidut, we have, it's the neshama that we're not always conscious of that has that burning desire for Hashem, that has the connection. So are you referring to a conscious level of our?
Of course, because it's our conscious level which shapes who we are. But we can, of course, use our talents, which is, what is a talent? The Greeks called talents muse. There's an expression in Hebrew, hamuzot, we're like angelic beings, because the Greeks thought that every talent came from some higher being. And
Inspiration.
they had this
Yeah.
idea that you put together talented people together in one room, and it was called museum.
Mm.
The idea of a museum is talented people bring it all together. It's like it was received from the gods. Every talent a person has is, you might say, a spiritual talent that we receive from above. And some have more and some have less. And some of them are Mozart's in their creation, or are Michelangelo's in their creations. And that could be their route to spirituality. By the way, it doesn't have to be their only route. But I'm saying that's something, if you could, music is part of the spirituality of this world. According to the Vilna Gaon, if you could understand the secrets of music, you would know how to revitalize the dead.
Yeah, I agree. I see
Resuscitate the
that.
dead. And the Khatam Sofer, who saw himself as a sort of a student of the Vilna Gaon, they lived almost at the same time. He said he would give half of his Torah to understand the secrets of music. So, but yeah. So what I'm saying that when you have these talents, through your talents, yes, it's one way. But he's going to give you another way too, and we don't have that much time, so I'm going to read it right now. But Perush al yedei emunah, through faith, Yecholim Mitzoy Emet. A person can find this point of truth. And to know that God is hiding him, her, itself behind a veil, you can discover this through emunah. Vayechi Yakov satum. That's why Vayechi Yakov is a parsha which is satum, which means there's no space between the parshas. It's as if it's blocked. It's to teach you that even in the land of Israel, there is vitality, but it's just blocked. And how do you unblock it? Through emunah, through belief. You have to work in belief. Emunah comes from the Hebrew word omanut, which means, of course, to be an artist. Emunah is something that you, like an artist, you have to learn how to play the music. You have to play the instrument. And so the instrument is in your soul. When you learn how to play it, it works better. It takes time. You have to train it. You got to work on it. It's a life investment, emunah. So, and he said it, and I heard from my grandfather, who said the name of Rav Simcha Bunim of Frashiska, said, why was it that Yakov wanted to tell them the end of days, the Kates, the Teretz, Shenoda Kates, and because if you know when the Galut is going to be over, Galut becomes easier. If I know I'm going to the Galut, like Galut Bavel is only 70 years, okay, so my grandchildren will be out of this Galut. In other words, I'm suffering, but Sfat Hashem, they'll get over it. They'll go back to the land of Israel. So once you know that there's light at the end of the tunnel, it feels easier. So if you can tell them when the end of the Galut will be, it might be a bit better. Then at least you know there's an end to it. But of course, he wasn't able to tell them that. But the truth is that the inner part of the world, which is godliness, is always there. It's never covered because it's always there. It's just the covering of the godliness, which makes the feeling of the galut, that's the part which is ended. So galut represents the veil which covers divinity in this world. And Yaakov wanted this to be revealed. So there would not be a galut. You can't do that. When you go in the galut, you're also in the galut. So he says, even though we're not on the level of Yaakov, because we believe that behind the veils is godliness, the stronger our belief, the more we can connect to this. Even if we were in Eretz Mitzrayim and we can follow the example of the truth of Yaakov, even though we're looking at the truth from a distance. Emunah is called the Sfirah of Malchut, the lower Sfirah. Emet is the Sfirah of Tiferet. So the Malchut can look at Tiferet from a distance, but it's not actually there. So the Emunah means I can believe it, and that belief can have an effect on me, even though I'm looking at it from a distance. I'm not actually connected to it directly like Yakov was. Yakov could feel that inner vitality. We can only believe in it. How can you actually feel that inner vitality more? Yedei bitul. Because David HaMelech is called the Malchut, he's called the king. He was able also to nullify his ego. When you nullify your ego, it opens you up for opportunities to be more connected with the upper worlds. And that's why it says, as my grandfather said, Yaakov Avinu lo met, Yaakov never died. Because in a sense, he always felt godliness even in this world. So even in this world, he was always alive. The tzaddikim are alive because they have this connection to the sanctity, to the godliness. They're never really in the galut, in the physicality of this world. So even their death is not that much of a difference in awareness. Okay. He's going to take this a little bit further. We'll take it just at the end here. And now he's comparing it to other things. When a person spends time trying to understand this, and this is the whole meaning of the oral Torah, the Talmud, because the Talmud tries to understand what the Torah is saying. So what the Talmud is trying to do is trying to bring us to this inner level. And this is the way that we can discover a little bit of the vitality of Yaakov Avinu, even in the darkness of the Galut. On Shabbat also, you have the level of Yaakov which is aroused. As it says in Yeshayahu, Yaakov, I will let you taste the inheritance of Yaakov. And how do we feel this on Shabbat? Ayidei bitul, by self-nullification, by putting our ego aside and just listening to the music of the neshama. Okay, is this too difficult?
Well, I think you need,
Interesting.
I just think that you need ego in order to feel that and to grasp that. If you have no ego, you think, well, I don't really matter. It's not all about me. So what do I care about my talents and about what it is that, I'm better at than everybody else? You know what I think you need the ego. I don't think you put the ego aside at all. I think it's the opposite.
I think the assumption was like Chazal say in Pirkei Avot, me'od me'od havei shfal ruach shetikvat enosh rima. You have to be very humble because the end of man is the grave. Chazal assumed that most people are arrogant. And, but it's true, there's some people who are very timid and they have the opposite problem. So I would say like 85% of the people, their problem is arrogance, and 15% of the people, their problem is the opposite. But yeah, to be alive means to want to survive, and to want to survive, you have to survive yourself. We are taught to be idealistic and altruistic, to do things for others, which, by the way, is against the first law of evolution, which is self-preservation. The whole idea of ethics is against the first law of evolution, which is self-preservation. Because if I want to preserve myself, why do I want to preserve somebody I have no connection to? Okay, if it's a child, if it's a parent, I got it. But some days I'm just like, John Doe, just because they're a human being. I mean, the Torah demands something which goes against, let's call it natural logic. And that's because we believe in a higher dimension.
A person can say that a talent that Hashem gave them, whatever it is, that Hashem gave me this talent, and so I want to pay it forward. So
Yeah.
you're acknowledging
for
that
sure.
you do have a
For
talent.
sure.
You're acknowledging you have a talent. You don't have to be humble about it. I have a talent, and I'm going to use it, and I praise Hashem for the talent, and I'm going to use it to pay it forward.
That's true. That is true. Well, being humble doesn't mean denying the truth.
Mhm.
It just means not talking about it that much. If a person, in the Talmud, there's discussions about these different, I forget what it was again, which in Masechta, about these different guys, where they're talking about since so-and-so died, the level of Torah dropped. And then one guy says, what about me? I'm still around. And so the parhsat say, what do you mean, what about you? You're supposed to have a little humility. Where's the anava here?
Yeah.
He says, no, when a person actually knows who they are, that's not being humble.
Right.
If Einstein were to say he understood something in physics, it's not being humble. That's who he is.
Right.
If he would say he
There's
understood,
actually something wrong with people being too humble.
I agree.
No,
I agree.
it's not okay. Don't, you know what? You are that person, own it. You don't have to schwitz about it, but don't,
But in today's in today's, like, with technology, you kind of have to toot your own horn, like on social media. If you're
yeah.
running a business and you want to be profitable, if you want to be noticed, you want to get, the likes and the friends and all those things, you have to sort of,
Right.
Toot
Of
your
course,
own horn.
but people
Yeah.
expect that. They expect you to say a thousand things. So if you say nothing, they think must be a piece of garbage. You didn't say anything good about it.
Yeah.
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 But again, the Talmud says that even the Talmud Chacham has to have shminit shebishminit shel ga'ava. Even the Talmud Chacham has to have 1/8 or of an eighth of an eighth of self. What's the term? Of kavod, of ga'ava, of being proud of who you are.
Yeah.
Because if you have like a nebuch, then the Torah looks like a nebuch. So you have
Right.
to
I
be
agree.
happy what you are, happy with your lot. So
Right.
obviously, if somebody says, "Have you studied the whole Talmud?" and you do, you're not supposed to say yes.
Debbie, I'll call you back in a minute.
Yesterday, I understand Talmud, but you don't have to say how much. It's like, you don't have to go into details and make it sound like
Right.
you're the genius. So
Yeah.
there were people like that. You wonder about that, but yeah. Sometimes I think the problem is the opposite. Like every pipsqueak who just got smicha, you hear them on the internet, and they're talking against this Rav and against that Rav. But what are they?
Mamash.
You have
Who do they think they are? They just
Oh,
got,
yeah,
they're Baal
without
Tshuva that
mentioning
turned
names,
like
there's
into a Rav a week later.
Yeah, there's this
And
guy in the
criticizes
States.
you who's
with
been
that-
Criticizes,
the
the
entire life.
FFBs.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, right. But
This
Why don't
rabbi
you
knows
do that?
nothing,
Why don't you
and he
do
quotes
that?
the show that he's known nothing. And look, I'm not saying the guy is the greatest rabbi ever, but I know who he is. He knows what he's talking about. And who is this
Yeah.
pipsqueak who's 19 years old or 20 years old
Mamash.
telling you that this
Chutzpah.
rabbi doesn't know
Yeah.
anything? But that's what you can do on the internet, You can cancel culture, whoever, and people think, whoa, if you're canceling everybody, you must be the great guy. It's the
That's what
exact
he like,
opposite.
Yeah.
Great people don't have a problem with there being other great people around.
Yeah.
It's people who are mediocre.
I'll
are
make
problem
room
with
for you,
great people.
Michelle. It's okay.
Okay, I think we went over the time. This is
Okay.
this is actually a good introduction to Sfat Emet because he's
Very
big on
nice.
this inner point, what the Hasidim called Invelt Oisfeld, that a person is supposed to have dual consciousness. You're living in a world of materialism, but you're supposed to let your mind transcend into world of spirituality. So you
So
remember.
I think next week we should all take a little LSD and see how much we transcend.
Microdose in a
Microdosing.
It's transcending
A
in your
smoothie,
consciousness. It's not changing your consciousness. It's not altered consciousness.
I'm only kidding. I don't do drugs.
say
Rabbi,
that.
do you come from Hasidim?
I actually wrote two books about the Misnagdim, about the Vilna Gaon, Chaim Volozhin. On my father's side, actually, we do come from Hasidei Tolna, but not directly. His grandfather was Hasidei Tolna in when he lived in the Crimea. And on the other side, and his mother's side, there were Misnagdim from Lithuania.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, my husband's is from Ger Hasidim. They're Ger Hasidim. My
Yeah.
husband's.
Okay.
But
Okay. So Sfat Emet is.
It didn't continue really.
You can't get more Gerer Hasidim than Sfat Emet. That's that's
Very
the
nice.
hardcore.
Why-
Okay, I
why
never
are you
learned it.
choosing-
Very nice. Thank
Why are
you.
you choosing Sfat Emet? Why are you choosing it for learning?
Why am I choosing Sfat Emet? First of all, it's quite popular. it really represents in my mind what Hasidic thought is, even though there are different types of Hasidic thought. It's on the parhsat Shavua. A lot of the Hasidic thought on the parhsat Shavua is sometimes very complex. If you read like Ohel Torah by the Rebbe of Kotsk, these little blurbs which are not self-explanatory. Try Rav Nachman on the parsha is not easy, even it was written by Rav Natan. So Sfat Emet, it's a little bit easier on the parsha. Mea Shiloach, but Mea Shiloach can also sometimes be difficult. So the Hasidim on the parsha is not always easy because they're not regular commentaries. It's a little bit like the Zohar that is using the psukim in order to get to an idea.
Mhm. I like it.
So-
It's something new for me.
So,
So the thing,
Oh.
so what we learned really by Vayechi is that about the word Vayechi, that he was actually really living and happy in Egypt, living. Yakov was happy and fulfilled living in Egypt. Is that what
yeah,
we?
but for him, the simcha that he feels, I mean, I explain it from a simple point of view that his family was back together. But for him, you feel happiness when you feel complete. You feel complete when you feel the divine vitality, which is on the other side of the veil. Yaakov was able to do that because he was on this very high level, like all the Avot. Even Yosef wasn't able to do it all the time. Yosef is not a Navi. He experiences Ruach HaKodesh every now and then, but he also has a hard time. When he was in that dungeon, he had no idea when he was getting out. That's why he asked the Sarah Mashkim, you got to help me when you get to Paro. So,
Yaakov had a hard time too. He was afraid of Esav.
He did.
He was into
Yes.
a lot of. He was in a lot of. He
He
was
said-
deceived. He was deceived by Lavan. His
He
work.
said he had a very hard life. He said he
Yes.
had a very hard.
both of them had a hard time, and that's why
Yeah.
they could identify with each other
Yeah.
in that sense. Yeah, the
Yeah.
Vilna Gaon says when Rivka says to Yaakov, Alai ki lelatcha b'ni, because Yaakov says, maybe my father will curse me. She says, the curse is on me. So the Hebrew is Alai, and Alai is Rashi Tevot. Esav, Lavan, Yosef. Those were the three klalot, the three curses in Yaakov's life. Esav, Lavan, and the selling of Yosef. So that's Alai ki lelatcha b'ni.
But
So,
to
yeah.
consider your son a klala is a very, very hard thing.
No, the sale of his son to Egypt was a
The
klal.
set, no, of Esav.
Oh, well, it was Esav's desire to kill Yosef.
Yeah, Yaakov. Yeah.
That's the klala.
His brother. Yeah.
Yeah, and Lavan too. The klala is what he did to him. What does he care
Yeah.
what Lavan does to the other
Yeah.
people? It's not his business.
So,
Okay.
very nice. Thank you.
Well, I have a
But,
question. I have a technical question. So
Yeah.
are we supposed to like know the parsha before we come?
Since we only did the first verse, all you had to know is the first verse in this one.
But be familiar with
Um,
the parsha before we
And also
we
this
meet?
idea of the parhsat stuma, that Vayechi is a parhsat stuma, which means there is no revach, there's no break between the previous parsha and this parsha. Usually there's a whole line break, and this one's not. Rashi already darshans it. And that's where he starts with. That's what he starts with. But then he goes off onto his tangent. He does this a lot. Sometimes he comes up with unusual ideas aside from this, but he's very much into this idea of pushing people to look for the spirituality within themselves. That's why this comes up a lot. This is like a motif within his writings. You can find it on every few pages.
Yeah. The Sfat Emet is in the Meforshim, but we never really,
Yeah.
we never learned it.
Yeah, it's not it's a Hasidic perush. It's
Mhm.
its own style.
Very
It's not like
nice.
the Or Chaim. It's not like the Ramban and
Rashi,
Kli
yeah.
Yakar.
Yeah, very nice. Thank you.
Okay, we'll try it again.
Thank
See what happens
you.
next week.
Okay,
Shalom,
thank
shalom.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye, thank you.
Hi,
Wait,
I'm gonna.
what's up?
What's going on, everybody?
Okay, should I sign out? If I sign out, I
Don't
think
sign
I'm-
out. I want to say hello to
Everybody
everybody.
do girl talk,
Oh,
yeah.
okay, so I won't sign out yet. I'll just turn off.
Thank
the-
you, Rafi.